Do you hear anything, Leo? Richard Wakefield's question was barely a breath, a suggestion more than sound. On the tray in Julia's hands, a water glass had just quivered one soft ripple against the rim, a silvered ring like a whispered bell. The boy on the sofa lifted his face, not much, just a tilt, a curious angle, as if the room had shifted by a fraction and his attention slid with it. The mansion knew how to keep a secret. It was the last week of March. Astoria washed in sea-cold air and a fine mist that softened the windows. In the Wakefield house, silence wasn't empty. It had been arranged. Felt pads under chair legs, soft close cabinet hinges, a rug that ran the length of the hall like a hush you could walk on. Even the grandfather clock had been retired to a study door, its chime disengaged. Calm as a kindness. The house seemed to say, let it hold. Julia had arrived at morning with a suitcase that felt smaller than her resolve and a slip of paper with the house code written twice. She had answered fewer questions than she had rehearsed. A widower, a son, 11, profound hearing loss, the agency had said. With that serious cadence professionals learn, each word set carefully on the table. The job description came with a binder of house guidelines. The first page read, "We maintain a quiet home." Now, in the late afternoon, a draft from the back corridor brushed the door, and the edge of her tray found the table a little too quickly. The glass hummed a soft note and trembled. Leo's eyes moved to flick, a search for something the room might have misplaced. His hands stayed neat in his lap. He did not speak. Julia felt the tiniest ache that wasn't pain, just a kind of pressure between curiosity and care. She'd seen children go very still when the world was too much. She'd seen them brace against a tension that felt like a storm. But this tilt had a question in it. Richard glanced at her, then back to his son. His features were the sort you would call handsome if you were the sort who counted sharp jaw. Careful hair, a tie that matched the darker blue in his suit. But you would have noticed what was harder to name, the part of him always busy taking account. Do you hear anything, Leo? He repeated, almost inaudible. Leo's gaze settled on the glass, then on nothing in particular, as if he'd heard a memory but not a sound. The moment feathered away. I'm sorry, Julia said simply. That was clumsy. Richard shook his head, polite, distant. Accidents happen. He lifted the glass, took a sip, and set it down with measured grace that made no ring at all. His voice stayed gentle, a courtesy that kept itself from being warm. He's had a long morning, of course. Julia kept her tone neutral and her eyes soft. In the hospital where she'd cleaned floors at night, she'd learned how attention could be a scalpel. You could cut with it and never touch the skin. She busied herself with the tray, napkins straightened, coasters aligned. Leo's shoes dangled above the carpet by a quarter-inch. His left sock slouched. When she reached to tuck it, she stopped at the edge of his space and offered her hand like a question mark. May I? He watched her fingers. After a beat, he nodded. Barely. She tugged the sock and smoothed it. Up close, his lashes were dark and long, the kind that made teachers say things like angel without meaning anything saintly by it. His mouth held the habit of neutrality. Leo, Richard said, Miss Julia is here to help around the house. She'll keep things orderly. You can show her your books later. Leo did not answer. He looked toward the French doors as if the river lived there, and it did, just beyond the wet lawn. A slice of the Columbia rolling under the bridge like old iron and patience. Thank you, Mr. Wakefield, Julia said. I'll make sure dinner is ready at 6:30, he corrected, reflexively. We eat after the tutoring session. She nodded. Around them, the room wore, its quiet, like a well-tailored coat, framed black and white photographs. Of the waterfront, a map with eyelashes of soundings, the piano closed, its key covered down like a benediction. She took a breath and felt the surgery of it, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Careful not to disturb in the kitchen, she set the tray down and went to work the way her late sister taught her prep, then pause. Listen to the room before you add heat. She rinsed vegetables, the water whispering into the sink. She set a pot on the burner as gently as she could. Even the boil later would be coaxed, not summoned. When she reached for a stack of glasses, she chose the heavier ones. She did not want more silver rings of coincidence to hum around them today. Half an hour passed in duties. The house had a rhythm you could join if you didn't try to lead. Lay the napkins, check the foyer, collect the mail. The binder had a note in the margin, someone's tidy handwriting. Please avoid sudden noises. Julia had smiled when she saw it. Good homes are made as much by the care not to startle as by the shine of the floors. She found Leo in the library, a paperback open on his knees. His eyes tracked, then drifted. She chose the empty chair across from him, left a respectful ocean of carpet between them, and sat down. The chair took her weight without complaint. Outside, a gull cried once, and the world beyond the glass folded the sound into itself before it reached the room. I like books that tell you the truth without raising their voice, she said, as if to herself. Richard looked up from the desk, caught her words, and allowed the smallest smile that almost wasn't one. That's an unusual way to put it. My sister used to say it. She let the sentence end there, the way you put a photo back in the envelope. She was a teacher. A nurse's aide, Julia said, but she taught me plenty. Richard's gaze went to Leo, then back to the ledger he was organizing. We tried to keep things predictable, he said, tone steady. It helps. Predictable can be a kind of kindness. She matched his steady, I'll follow the routine. If I ever get something wrong, I'll make it right. Good. He capped his pen. People mean well. We've had suggestions. The breath he took was almost a laugh, then a sigh. The world likes to offer them. I don't traffic in miracles, Julia said. Only attention. He studied her face for the half-second that marks a decision. Attention is welcome. Hang your coat by the mudroom door, not the hall closet. It sticks. Understood. A minute later, on her way back through the sitting room, she almost didn't see the game the way the last light off the river laced itself into the glass decanter on the console. The sun slid behind clouds and the crystal flashed once as the house settled, just enough to whisper that same note, a glass sigh. Leo looked over, fast, instinct, not thought, the sort of head turn that doesn't belong to politeness or coincidence. He caught himself at once, returned to his book, his face returned to neutral in a professional way, like a child who had learned not to show his math. If you hadn't been watching, you would have called it nothing. Julia was watching. Her heart did that small pressure again. She didn't move. She didn't make a sound. She let the moment fold closed, the way you close a letter in a room full of people quietly, with cursor that only the person it's meant for knows the words are. There, at the doorway, Richard's voice found her. Ms. Julia, yes. He stood with his hands in his pockets as if to keep them from fixing what couldn't be fixed. We appreciate order, he said. I appreciate it, but if at any point you feel the work is a mismatch, tell me. Early is it a test, Mr. Wakefield? Julia asked, not unkindly. No, he considered. It's a request for honesty. Then I'll make a request back. She held his gaze until he met it fully. If I notice something small, I'll note it. I won't make a parade out of it. I won't make promises I can't keep. The corner of his mouth lifted. It might have been respect. It might have been relief disguised as formality. That seems fair. Fair is a good place to start. She finished her circuit of the room, set nothing down too quickly, and walked toward the kitchen with the posture of someone carrying a cup filled to the brim. When she reached the pantry, she took her little notebook from the apron pocket. Pages, edges soft from years of lists and midnight reminders. She dated the top right corner, March 24th, 2011, beneath it. She printed in small, neat letters, the ink steady even as her hand was not. He turned toward the glass when it trembled. She waited. Then added a second line, underlined once. He responds. To vibration, this wasn't an accident. This house has a rhythm, Arthur Hale said, blocking the hallway with the poise of a man who never raised his voice because he never needed to. Please don't change the beat. Julia angled her tray against her hip and smiled the way you smile at a nonsense motto d. I'm only trying to learn the steps. The steps, Arthur replied, are light. The Wakefield corridor stretched ahead, a polished river of old-growth fur. It glowed with the kind of sheen you don't buy. You inherit it from hands that care. Felt pads under every chair, soft close hinges, rugs like whispers, quiet here. Wasn't just preference, it was architecture. By mid-morning, Leo sat on the runner by the library door, a puzzle of wooden animals spread like a small parade. The boy's shoulders rested in their familiar neutrality. He rolled a wooden whale with 2 fingers. Not so much playing as letting the toy teach him the slope of the floor. Julia approached with a dust cloth she didn't need. She lengthened her stride, set her toes first, then at the last plank before. Leo let a breath more weight fall through her heel. A hush, a thrum, nothing more than a moth's heart. Leo's chin lifted, not high, not long, just a brief compass needle. Finding north and pretending it hadn't, she kept moving. 2 steps light, 1 fraction heavy. The air didn't change, but attention did. He tracked nothing, and everything. In the music room after lunch, Rachel arrived with a canvas tote, a slim keyboard in a padded sleeve, and the kind of smile you wear for children and fragile adults. She was early 30s, hair pulled into a practical knot, shoes that didn't squeak. Miss Julia, she asked, warm but at an angle, as if she too, had learned to speak to this house from the side. Just Julia. Julia said, "Welcome." They kept the keyboard zipped. Rachel opened a cloth pouch instead, revealing a small wooden metronome with a brass pendulum. She didn't wind it. She only set it on the closed piano like a sleeping bird. "Sometimes," Rachel said, fingers flat on the piano lid, "a door won't open to melody, but it will to rhythm." Julia let the sentence settle. "Do you think he's listened?" "Even a little." Rachel watched the doorway once, she said. "Last spring I played a cello piece low and slow. I thought I was alone in feeling the floor sing. Then I noticed Leo's fingers on the arm of the chair, not tapping. Exactly, echoing to notes late, as if he and the music had met in the middle and shaken hands." "What happened?" Arthur stepped into the threshold the way autumn steps into a room. "Inevitably, what happened," he answered, "is that we keep the home consistent, calm." Rachel understands. He offered the teacher a look that wasn't unkind so much as it was practiced. "Mr. Wakefield has asked for predictability." Rachel's posture softened, of course. Arthur's eyes returned to Julia. "We don't test children the way you test a floorboard." "No," Julia said, gently. "We test the floorboard so the child doesn't fall." His gaze measured her. "Please don't make this a crusade." "I don't do crusades," she said, folding the dust cloth once. "Then again, I do attention." Arthur's reply was a single, almost imperceptible nod, bureaucratic, respectant. Then he was gone, the air healing behind him. Rachel exhaled. "He loves Leo," she said softly. "We all do. The quiet is a fortress he built to keep the storms out. Fortresses keep sunlight out, too," Julia said. "True," Rachel admitted. "But a lot of storms start with good intentions." She glanced toward the hall. "I can't play today, the schedule is reading only, but I can tell you this. Bass is our friend. Floors are our friends. The body listens even when the ears don't." "The body listens," Julia repeated, like a note to carry. Later, in the study, Richard stood by the window with a ledger he didn't seem to be reading. The river lay gray and patient beyond the glass. He didn't turn when Julia entered. "Perhaps in a house this quiet, you learn to know people were there without the proof of noise." "Mr. Wakefield," she said, careful with his name. "May I ask something about the routine?" "You just did," he answered. Mild. He set the ledger down and faced her. "Ask." "I've noticed Leo responds to certain patterns." She kept her voice low, as if each syllable were a porcelain cup. "I won't promise anything. I won't make a parade. But would you mind if I very gently observe how he does with heavier steps, doorframes, the way objects meet surfaces, no sound added, just everyday life attended to?" He studied her. Grief dressed as order looked back at her from his eyes. "People have promised us ladders before," he said. "The ape always ended in air." "I don't build ladders," Julia replied. "I mark footholds." He wanted to say no. She could feel it like temperature. He also wanted not to be the man who made the world smaller for his son by insisting it stay small. He tugged his cuff, a gesture of someone used to straight lines. "Keep it gentle," he said at last. "No devices, no theatrics. Gentle is the only way I work." And Julia, his voice found a lower register. "Don't create false hope. Hope without evidence is noise," she said. "Attention is a note." Something in his face eased a degree. 6:30 dinner. He likes the wooden spoon, not the metal rings. I'll remember. She did. Through the afternoon, she remembered everything and changed nothing, almost nothing. When she crossed the hall by the library where Leo sat with a book, she let one step carry her full weight, then to like a whisper. At the sideboard, she adjusted a vase a quarter inch so its base met the wood cleanly rather than skidding. She didn't speak. She didn't watch him directly. Out of the corner of her attention, a small face turned a fraction, as if the room had winked and he was deciding whether to wink back. In the kitchen, Arthur checked a delivery. "Soup?" he asked. "Chicken with orzo," Julia said. "Soft, familiar, predictable," he murmured, approving. She ladled broth into a bowl and felt the calm of doing something right. When Richard came in for a glass of water, he moved with litigator caution, every placement intentional. He poured from the pitcher and set the glass down with the kind of care we save for sleeping children and explosives. "You handle objects like they have feelings," Julia observed. "They have consequences," Richard said. He glanced toward the doorway. "Leo likes to sit where he can see the trees." "Trees make good company," she said, "and they keep their secrets." "Only until the wind tells them," she replied, surprising herself. A muscle in his cheek tried not to smile. He let it succeed. 6:30. He reminded her. but it sounded like gratitude wearing its least embarrassing coat. Evening drew the edges in. The river darkened to charcoal. The house leaned into its habitual hush. Rachel's tote was gone. Arthur made the rounds with that priestly precision of his, extinguishing lamps that didn't need to shine and straightening frames that hadn't dared to tilt. Leo settled on the sofa with his book again, the lamplight turned low enough to be kind. Julia carried a simple tray to glasses, a pitcher, a folded napkin and paused at the threshold. She felt the floor through the soles of her shoes, the way you feel a cat on the other side of a door. She breathed in, out. At the coffee table, she set the tray down gently. Then she lifted one glass and, without coasters or apology, set it directly on the bare wood. Not hard, not showy. A plain act, the sort that happens 1,000 times a day in noisier lives. The base met the table. A slight tremor, a silver ring of water trembled against the rim. Leo looked, not a flinch, not startled. He looked as a sailor looks when a wind touches the skin before it touches the sails, alert, alive, telling himself he didn't notice while turning toward it anyway. His eyes traveled from the glass to the line of the wood, as if following a map drawn in vibrations. Across the room, Arthur paused mid-step, a question blooming and closing on his face. In the doorway beyond, Richard stood very still, hands at his sides like he'd taught them not to reach for what couldn't be held. Julia said nothing. Words would have been a noise. She only watched the smallest truth gather itself in the quiet and shine. The glass settled. The ripple faded. Leo's gaze stayed one heartbeat longer, as if he could still feel the echo the way one feels a drum through the floor. After the last note has died, he turned the page of his book. And Julia, heart steady now, memorized the moment, and the sentence that came with it, a sentence she would write down later but could already hear. He follows the vibration without being asked. The rain returned before dawn, a patient drummer on the Wakefield roof. By breakfast, the house seemed to breathe in time with its old wood settling, pipes humming their winter hymn, the river making its long, low promises just beyond the lawn. Julia listened with the kind of attention you only give when you're trying not to hope. She reminded herself, attention is not a miracle. It is a lamp you can carry into a dim room. Good morning, Richard said from the doorway, a legal pad tucked under his arm. He's still sleeping. Then the day can learn to be gentle, Julia replied. He took half a beat, as if measuring whether the line was sentiment or plan. Gentle is fine, he said. Predictable is better. Predictable, she agreed, with room for truth. A corner of his mouth twitched. You're fond of aphorisms. I'm fond of footholds, she said, and let him keep the last word by not saying anything else. By mid-morning, Leo drifted into the library in his grey sweater, book under his arm, posture neutral as ever in a ellipse of quiet moving through the room. He sat on the floor near the window and opened to the middle, the way a boy opens to a page he already knows by heart. Julia made tea. She chose the heavier mug. Even the steam felt like it should whisper. She began her little experiment the way a singer warms a low note soft, unannounced, buying trust with patience. At the side table, she set the mug down as if the surface could bruise. Nothing. At the desk, she let the tip of her pen touch the oak in a single point tack as small as a thought. Leo's lashes flinched. Not much. Enough. Nice pen, Arthur said from the hall, like a man making conversation at a funeral. He stood with a basket of ironed napkins, immaculate and immovable. It writes what I mean, Julia said. It may write more than that if you make a habit of tapping, he replied. A sigh almost reached his voice, but decided against it. We've been down these corridors before. Then you know where they turn, she answered. He considered her. We know where they did end. Then perhaps we missed the door that opens inward. Arthur's gaze slid to Leo, then back. You will find Mr. Wakefield values evidence over poetry. Poetry is only evidence arranged to be remembered, Julia said, and smiled just enough to soften the line. Arthur didn't smile back, which somehow felt like a kind of respect. Lunch at 12:30, he said, and withdrew. Like a tide dot in the quiet he left. Julia moved to the doorway and, with the back of her knuckle, brushed the door's edge against the frame. It wasn't a knock. It was the breath of one wood meeting wood, a low syllable even the carpet could feel. Leo's head turned a few degrees. His eyes didn't widen, his mouth didn't change. He looked the way a deer looks when the ground speaks before the wind does. Julia said nothing. She placed a spoon near the saucer and let the metal kiss porcelain once. Too bright, too high. Leo didn't blink. She set the spoon aside as if it had misbehaved, picked up the mug, and felt her own pulse in her fingers. In the afternoon, when the rain softened, She crossed the hall with a small dusting brush and tapped the art frame just enough to seat it. The frame answered with a tiny wooden hello. Leo's right hand paused on the page. His thumb hovered. Then, as if he'd decided to keep his secret, he turned the page and pretended not to have heard. Julia's heart tugged in that familiar way, half ache, half prayer. The body listens, Rachel had said. Julia believed it. Now the way you believe in gravity. You watch it hold what would fall. She held the house like a musical instrument for the rest of the day. She let the dining chair land on the rug with the weight of a single syllable. She opened the pantry door so the latch whispered yes. In each, she heard a low frequency of invitation. In each, Leo's attention sharpened for the length of a breath, then smoothed flat as the river dot at 4, while Arthur walked the perimeter like a well-meaning sentinel. Julia hunted fresh candles in the service hallway and narrow artery between kitchen and mudroom where the house stored its practical memory, extra bulbs, cleaning supplies, a plastic bin of bandages, a small lockbox labeled medical. She didn't plan to pry. She planned to dust the shelf and return with nothing but wicks. The lockbox wasn't locked. Inside a roll of tape, a half sleeve of sterile gauze, 2 expired thermometers, and a brown glass bottle the size of a thumb. The label was yellowed and bubbled at one corner. In tidy black type, Leo. Beneath it, smaller neonatal unit, Providence Seaside. A date from the first week of his life. A dosage line, unreadable under a fingerprint's pale ghost. Julia felt a cold she didn't blame. On the hallway, she lifted the bottle like a confession. The liquid clung at the bottom in a thin meniscus, the color of weak tea. Can I help you find something? Arthur's voice, right behind her. She didn't jump. People who've worked around hospital. Alarms don't spook easily. Candles, she said, turning the label against her palm without thinking. For the dining table, top shelf left. He took a step closer, the way a guardian dog takes a step without barking. That box is medical. Best not to mix inventories. I don't mix, she said. She reached for the candles and felt the bottle burn cool in her apron pocket. Thank you. When he was gone, she stood alone in the narrow light and made herself breathe. Curiosity is not a crime, she told herself, but negligence is. She put the lockbox back where it had been and closed the closet, the door's magnet offering its small, loyal click. In the kitchen. She waited until the kettle sang its faint throat clearing, and then stepped into the pantry where the cell reception was strongest. She dialed a number she hadn't dialed in months. It rang twice. Helena Novak, a voice answered, brisk and warm, like a good April day. Lena, Julia said, and felt something in her chest exhale. It's me, Jules, Helena breathed. You only call when the universe misbehaves, or when it behaves in ways no one's looking for. That's the same thing, Helena said. Tell me. So Julia did, careful as surgery. The glass ring, the doorframe breath, the boy who turned his head as if the world had brushed his sleeve. She told her about the house that organized its quiet into a protocol. She told her about heavy mugs and light steps and the way attention felt like a bell no one else could hear. And Helena asked, voice low now, clinician and friend in the same note. In the service hall, Julia said, eyes on the pantry door as if words could leak. A small bottle, brown glass, his name, NICU label from the first week. Helena was quiet long enough for Julia to hear her own pulse again. Do not draw conclusions, Helena said at last. Do not confront. Do not accuse. Document. Jules, listen to me. If you suspect an error in early care or an outdated assumption that calcified into truth, there's a way to unwind that without breaking the child inside it. I'm not a crusader, Julia said. You're a witness, Helena replied. Good witnesses are boring. They write down times. They write down details. They keep their adjectives in their pockets. You said low frequencies keep testing the world the way life would anyway. Record what he does without asking him to do it. And if you find anything else, anything, call me first. What about the bottle? Do not discard it, Helena said. The syllables exact. Do not display it. Do not discuss it. If what you're describing is real, we may need a full independent evaluation at an audiology center, not a living room. But until then, no one benefits from a fight with shadows. Then I'll stand in the light, Julia said, and let it tell you what's there, Helena finished. Jules, yes. Hope is not the enemy, Helena said softly, but she has a loud sister named Haste. Keep them in separate rooms. Julia smiled, unexpected and grateful. I'll lock the door between them. After the call, the house felt different, only because she did. The same rain, the same old wood, the same river lengths of grey. She took the bottle from her apron and held it at the window until the liquid showed its thin body. She read the label twice, a third time for the date. Then she wrapped it in a napkin, slid it into the inside pocket of the housekeeper's binder, and shut the cover like a secret. Dinner was ordinary in the ways that keep a family from breaking. Ways a boy learns his father's silhouette against a lamplight, and the ways a man learns to set a fork down without noise. Leo ate quietly, eyes occasionally measuring the rim of his glass. Richard asked how the roast was and didn't mention the world once. Arthur discussed the grocery list as if inventory could save a soul. When the plates were cleared and the lamps were clicked too low, Julia stood at the library door and rested the back of her knuckle against the frame again. Low, gentle, the house answered with a pulse you felt before you heard. Leo looked up. It was the look of someone who knows the earth speaks underfoot. Someone who has learned to tell the difference between a thunderclap and the rumor of one. He returned to his book, the way a careful heart returns to its camouflage. From the hallway, Richard watched them both the way a man watches a Schwallenenscher, if the tide is coming in or simply reconsidering. Julia pressed her palm once against the binder at her side, feeling the rectangle of the hidden bottle like a second heartbeat. In her notebook later, she wrote, "He answers the room when the room speaks low," and beneath it, smaller, a line she underlined twice and did not read aloud. "Past is in the house with us. I have to learn how to open the right door." Morning broke with a pale gold that didn't quite warm the river. The house accepted the light like an apology and kept its quiet anyway. Julia tied her apron and told herself the same thing she'd told herself since the first night. Attention is not a promise. It's a practice. She began with the ordinary, because that is where truth likes to hide. At the dining table, she lifted a chair by a breath and slid it forward the width of a thumb. The felt pads kissed the floor with a low hush. Across the room, Leo, half curled on the sofa with a book he wasn't reading, paused the way a rabbit pauses when the ground remembers a fox. His eyes tracked not the chair but the invisible line between wood and weight. Julia looked at the clock on the mantel. 8:17 and wrote it down in her notebook. Chair glide, barely eyes left to right. 1 second. In the nursery closet, in a wicker basket under a folded blanket, she found a tiny toy piano with paint worn off, where small hands had once insisted. She carried it to the library and set it on the rug as if she were returning a bird to its nest. She didn't press the keys, she only laid her palm lightly on the wooden case and let it meet the floor. The contact made a dull, friendly syllable, the sound a house makes when it remembers being built. Leo's head lifted. Fraction only, the way iron filings lift when a magnet passes under paper. His fingers stayed on the page. His attention did not. Toy piano down, head tilt 3 degrees. No flinch. 9:02, she wrote, adding a tiny arrow to mark the direction he'd looked. Arthur appeared in the doorway carrying fresh linens like a man bearing doctrine, rearranging the orchestra. "Are we just setting instruments where they belong?" Julia said. "I am fond of still lifes," he replied. "They do not startle. Still lifes are made of living things that agreed to hold their breath," she said, then softened it with a small smile. "I won't let the picture fall." His gaze dropped to the toy piano. "That was Eleanor's," he said, the name landing as gently as dust. "She brought it home the week Leo was discharged." He lingered a heartbeat, then straightened a framed map that did not need straightening. "If Mr. Wakefield asks, tell him I endorsed nothing." "Understood." At mid-morning, Julia stood in the hall where the runner met bare wood. She let the back of her hand brush the wall so the frame on the nearest photograph settled into its nail with a sound only the floor could love. Leo, 20 feet away, not looking, paused in the middle of bringing his glass to his lips. A moment's delay, as if the room had finished a sentence he was trying not to hear. He drank and pretended there had been no conversation. Frame seat pause before sip. 1 beat 10:11. She underlined the time. Patterns. Pay rent. Coincidences are tourists. Richard found her at the library threshold, hands in his pockets like a ceasefire. "Arthur says the nursery is missing a piano." "It was exiled to a closet," Julia said. "I repatriated it." He almost smiled. "We try to keep things in their places." "Places change when the person in them grows," she answered. "Poetry again," he said. "Observation," she corrected softly. "If truth is knocking, it will do so softly first." He glanced toward Leo. "And if truth is only the wind under the door, then it will keep coming back. Wind is persistent." He leaned against the doorframe, posture tidy and tired. "We have cameras in the hallways," he said. "Insurance, mostly, and to help when things go missing. Leo, sometimes he wanders at night. I review the footage. Do you see anything?" Julia asked. "I see a boy move like a ghost and a father try not to be one," he said, surprising himself. "Last night I thought I saw his eyes." He stopped. as if unsure whether finishing the sentence would invite the universe to play tricks. I'll look again, he finished, clearing his throat into composure. Let the camera be the scientist, Julia said. Let us be its students. After lunch, the house drew into its quiet spine. Somewhere down the hall, a dryer clicked warm punctuation into the air. Julia took the chance to sort the mail bills, a postcard from an alumni fund, to medical statements and envelopes as self-effacing as undertakers. She stacked them as Arthur liked them, due soonest on top. Nothing skewed. An envelope at the bottom had the soft look of paper that's traveled and then been forgotten. No return address, just a printed window and a tiny blue stamp. Providence Health Bodyology. She felt permission, and then the lack of it. She chose order as her alibi. Loose papers belong inside their files. She brought the envelope to the study where a leather folio labeled Maid rested under the clock. She meant only to slide it in under past statements. When she opened the folio, a smaller envelope slipped out, cream handwritten, "Oh so polite." Inside, a single appointment card from a decade ago. Infant auditory brainstem response Monday 10 a.m. A signature at the bottom authorizing the referral. The ink long since turned to the brown of old tea. The first name curled like smoke. The last name was a tidy block. Not Richard's, not Eleanor's. Julia stared at the room as if it might finish the line for her. It didn't. The desk was its same faithful wood. The map of the Columbia held its same purposeful veins. She held the card to the light like a truth she wasn't ready to know. Arthur's reflection appeared in the glass of the bookcase before his voice reached her, looking for something. Putting things where they live, she said. An admirable pastime. He approached slowly, the way Law approaches truth, careful to keep his shoes clean. The study is Mr. Wake province. I'm in it to keep it in order, she replied. I don't read what's not mine. She slid the card back into the folio, felt it settle like a breath taken and not released. Do you recognize the signature on some of these old referrals? Arthur's gaze never left her face. I recognize grief signatures, he said. They all look the same. Untidy, late. This one is neat, she said, and unfamiliar. Then it's either a specialist or a clerical error, he said, which is how people who believe in systems pronounce the word mystery. Shall I take that? I'll file it, she said, not giving him the moment where things go missing. Safer that way. He nodded. Dinner at 6:30. Predictable, she said. Merciful, he answered, and left her with the clock. At 5, the river lifted a wind that pressed the house into itself, and the floorboards gave a low, old, comforting groan. Julia was walking past the library just then and took one purposeful step that let her heel find wood, not runner. The sound small, a bass note traveled. Leo's eyes skimmed the edge of his page and snagged on the hallway. He didn't smile, he didn't frown, he simply registered, the way a seismograph registers a tremor, too modest for conversation, and too honest to ignore. In the kitchen, Richard stood at the island slicing apples as if a jury might grade his consistency. He's been reading more, he said, which could have been an observation or a wish, or practicing the art of looking like he is, Julia said lightly. He set the knife down. I reviewed the footage from last night, he said without preface. At 9:12, you pass the library. You don't look at him, you don't speak. You do something with the picture frame. Seated, she said. He nodded, and his eyes. He stopped again, as if describing it would make it smaller. They follow the sound, not the picture. The sound, the change, she said. He watches the change. Richard let out a breath he hadn't meant to keep. Coincidence, he said, obedient to the laws he'd made to protect himself. Coincidence doesn't show up on schedule, Julia said softly. Patterns pay rent. They live here. He picked up the knife, then set it down again as if the apple could wait while the universe finished its sentence. If you're right. The words climbed and stalled. If you're wrong, I'm wrong, she said, feeling the weight of it in her own mouth. I'm a noise in the quiet you built to keep him safe. They stood there a moment with the kind of silence that knows it isn't empty. After dinner, after dishes, after the house put on its evening lamps like jewelry it didn't show off, Julia returned to the study. She closed the door behind her, and sat at the desk in the small circle of light the green-shaded lamp made. She brought the folio out, opened it as if it were a door she wasn't sure she had the right to open. The appointment card lay where she'd left it. She read the date again, the time again, the test again. Her thumb found the unfamiliar signature and held there, as if the paper might confess under pressure. In the notebook she kept in her apron, she wrote, today, chair glide, toy piano set down, frame seat, heel on wood, consistent small responses at low frequencies. Hall camera confirms eye movement to sound, not image. Found referral card infant ABR with unfamiliar signature. Action. Continued documenting. Her hand shook a minute tremor that had nothing to do with cold. She steadied the page with her other hand and added, smaller, where only the bravest thoughts go. If I am wrong, I will have broken the last good trust a father holds. She closed the notebook on the sentence before it could echo, turned out the lamp, and let the dark say nothing. The afternoon sun laid itself across the Wakefield lawn like a reluctant guest. Through the open window, light found the edges of Leo's hair, and for once the boy didn't look like a shadow. He sat cross-legged on the carpet, a line of toy animals arranged as if awaiting judgment. His hands were steady, his silence, as always, was complete. Julia knelt by the low shelf, pretending to dust, though her heart was beating a tempo faster than her fingers. She had been building toward this moment patiently, quietly, carefully, one controlled tremor at a time. Today, she would try something different, Leo, she said softly, though she knew sound had always been treated like an intruder here. Would you like to hear the rain? He didn't look up, but one of the animals tipped sideways, his fingers resting too long on its head. Julia slipped a pair of small headphones from her apron pocket, the kind meant for a music player but, now connected to nothing more than her courage, she had prepared a file, a recording of the Columbia River's low, endless hush, mixed so softly it sounded more like breathing than water. She placed the headphones gently around his ears. No announcement, no grand ceremony, just the river, pressed close to his skin. For a moment he was a statue in a museum of silence. Then barely his chin tilted, his lips parted as if tasting the air. Julia kept still, even her breath disciplined. It happened, the faintest shaping of a word, so fragile it could have been mistaken for wind through grass. Ma. Julia closed her eyes. When she opened them, tears had threatened but disciplined themselves. She leaned forward. Say it again if you want to. Leo's brows pinched, the sound inside him searching for a door. Me, the syllable, faltered, unfinished, but it was there. Mother, Julia whispered, steady as prayer. Behind them, the study door clicked open. Richard stood frozen, one hand on the frame, the other falling uselessly to his side. His face looked as though he'd stepped into a country he'd been told no map could lead him to. What did he say? His voice broke between suspicion and awe. Julia didn't turn from Leo. He said what he has always carried, she answered. You just haven't been in the room when it tried to leave. Richard stepped closer, each footfall deliberate, as if the carpet were glass. Say it again, Leo, he whispered, his composure leaking into plea. Please, say it again. Leo only tilted his head, the headphones still faintly whispering the river. His lips moved, silent this time, but his eyes, clearer than Julia had ever seen them, sought his father's face. Richard sank to his knees. For a long moment he looked not like a man of wealth and order, but like any father suddenly caught in the miracle of his own child. His throat worked. Julia, don't tell me this is a coincidence. It isn't, she said firmly, her voice steady enough to hold them both. But it isn't magic either, it's response. It's possibility. What comes next has to be measured, not assumed. Richard's hand shook where it hovered above his son's shoulder. Do you understand what you're asking me? To believe that everything the diagnoses, the years, the silence was wrong. I'm asking you not to lock the door if he's knocking, Julia said. The headphones slipped slightly. Julia adjusted them. The sound of the river lapped gently into the room. Leo's fingers began to tap his knee, uneven but deliberate, as if he were echoing the tide. Richard sat back, stunned. All this time, Julia chose her words as if they were glass she couldn't afford to drop. All this time, he may have been listening in a language none of us bothered to learn. The boy touched his lips again, almost experimentally, then turned back to his toys, lining the whale next to the bear. The moment passed, but it had already changed the air. Richard rose, his face still unreadable, but his voice had the edge of surrender. We can't keep this here, he said. Not just between walls. If there's even a fraction of truth. He stopped, pressed his fingers to his temple, then looked at Julia. Schedule an evaluation. Independent. This week. Julia nodded. I'll call Dr. Helena, she'll know where. Richard's jaw set, the kind of resolve that belongs to contracts and courtrooms but had never served his son. Do it. No delays. I want this documented. And if the tests say otherwise, Julia asked gently, then I'll grieve honestly, he said. His eyes met hers, stripped of pretense. But I won't let fear write the last word again. The camera in the corner of the room blinked once, its red light, steady, recording the scene with the indifference of machines. Julia noticed it and almost smiled finally. A witness no one could silence. Later that night, Long after the dishes were cleared and Arthur had done his silent rounds, Julia sat at her small desk in the servants' wing. She opened her notebook. March 28, 2011, 3:46 p.m. Experiment, ambient, low-frequency sound through headphones, river. Result, clear response, first audible attempt at word ma, then me. Context, father, present, witnessed, camera likely recorded. She paused, then wrote the final line slower than the rest. The house heard him, the father did too. There is no turning back. Julia closed the notebook and pressed it to her chest. For the first time since stepping into the Wakefield estate, she allowed herself to believe in something louder than silence. Hope measured, fragile, but alive. And in the library down the hall, the red eye of the camera kept its vigil, holding proof like a lantern in the dark. The waiting room at Providence Audiology smelled faintly of paper and rain. A fish tank whispered its gentle argument for calm. A poster on the wall showed a cartoon ear like a seashell, listening to a blue world. Richard sat with his elbows on his knees and his hands steepled, not in prayer exactly, but in that posture people adopt when they want time to argue them out of hope before the facts arrive. Julia sat beside Leo. She didn't touch him, she matched his breathing instead. Attention is not a promise, it's a practice, she told herself again, and watched the second hand on the clock sweep a circle that never ended and always did. A door opened. A woman in slate scrubs with a soft wool cardigan and serious eyes stood there with a folder. Leo Wakefield. Richard rose, so fast the chair whispered against the floor. Yes, I'm Dr. Mara Patel, the woman said, her voice pitched for quiet places. We'll start with a non-invasive panel tympanometry, autoacoustic emissions, conditioned play in the booth. We test the hearing he has, not the hearing we wish he had. She smiled once, quick and human. You can come. Inside, the booth was a small clean room with the gentleness of a library. Dr. Patel moved like someone who had spent a lifetime getting out of sound's way. She fitted Leo with child-size earphones without making a ceremony of it, placed foam blocks on the table, and said, when you hear the low drum, drop the block in the bucket. She didn't say tone, she didn't say beep. She said low drum. Julia liked her instantly. They began. High frequencies first, because that's the ladder most people climb. And because ladders have a way of telling you when they're missing. Rungs, at 1,000 and 2,000 and 4,000 hertz. Leo was a stone in a stream. Dr. Patel's pen made small, tidy notes. At 250 hertz a sound you feel before you hear the boy's fingers twitched. He didn't drop the block. He considered dropping it. At 100, delivered through the bone oscillator like someone tapping the skull's door from the inside. His eyes moved. A beat later, a block plunked into the bucket. Richard didn't breathe out so much as leak air, he responded. He did, you see. I saw, Dr. Patel said, without victory, without pity. Let's confirm. She changed the pattern. She switched ears. She introduced a gentle vibration through the chair's base. Let the low note find him the way the river had. Another block, then a miss, then a block again, this time late, as if the sound and his attention had to walk across the room, to meet and shake hands. In between trials, she slid a small probe into the canal and ran tympanometry, the machine drawing. A quiet curve of compliance. Middle ear mobility looks within normal limits. She murmured autoacoustic emissions at mid-high frequencies. Absent, not a surprise, not a verdict. She wrote another line. When it was over, she removed the headphones like you take a hat off a sleeping child. He is not responding to speech-range tones at conversational levels, Dr. Patel said in the counseling room. But we have consistent, repeatable responses to low-frequency stimuli at higher intensities and to input. That fits with what you've been observing. Richard's mouth opened and closed. So he does not meet criteria for profound bilateral deafness, she answered. Precise, careful. He may have limited residual hearing, at low frequencies and sensitivity to vibration. That's function, Mr. Wakefield, not nothing. She turned the audiogram toward them. This paper is not your son, it's a map, and maps change as you learn the land. Julia felt her throat tighten. What's next? A tone burst ABR to confirm neural synchrony, Dr. Patel said. Normally we reserve a BR for infants, but in complex cases we use it to corroborate behavioral results. No sedation. If we can help it, we can schedule a late evening session and let him drift. I'll also write for a functional assessment, with a music therapist who specializes in low-frequency entrainment. Richard nodded like a man who had been offered both a cliff and a bridge. Thank you, he managed. Then, more quietly, as if asking permission of the world, if the result is truth, I can live with sorrow. I can't live with blindness. Dr. Patel met his eyes. Truth doesn't need to be loud to be real, she said. Take this home. He has a door. Our work is to find the hinge. They met Dr. Helena at the coffee kiosk just outside the white coat, just a navy sweater and the authority of someone who shows up when it matters. She hugged Julia in that unshowy way that saves people in parking lots, reports. She asked. Julia handed over the folder Dr. Patel had given them and, from her own bag, the housebinder referral card, notes, the envelope from Providence, audiology she'd found, even the photograph she'd taken, hand steady. Label legible of the brown neonatal bottle before she tucked it away again. I don't know what any of this means, she said, but I know what I saw. Helena paged through, brows knitting, not with alarm but with work. She stopped at the decade-old appointment card. Infant AB arclic only. She read, that tells you about the high-frequency region near the base of the cochlea, not low-frequency function, and the signature who is H. Mason PAC, not hospital staff as far as we can tell, Richard said, and not Eleanor's pediatrician. We've never met them. Helena glanced up. Was there documented follow-up? There are gaps, Julia said, like the file itself has missing teeth. Helena's jaw settled into decision. All right, listen carefully. I'm filing a formal concern with the state health authority process, not accusation. The question is whether early screening and follow-up met standard of care at the time. If there were errors or omissions, we correct the record so future care plans don't stand on a crooked floor. Richard winced at the phrase crooked floor, as if the house itself had heard. Will that mean litigation? It means accountability without theatrics, Helena said. This is about care, not courtroom victories. We start with a preliminary review. If an agency needs to look, they will. Meanwhile, Leo needs speech and music therapy designed for low-frequency access and vibration. That starts now. Julia exhaled. I can document the home responses. Times, triggers, duration. Good, Helena said. Be boring on paper. Boring is how truth survives cross-examination. Richard almost smiled. You'd do well in my world. I prefer mine, Helena said, but I visit yours when my kids need it. She glanced at her phone, then back to Richard. I'd like a 15-minute consult with a county judge to confirm we can pursue an independent review without stepping on old orders. Judge Owens, Richard asked. Helena nodded. He sits in family court. Sensible man, knows the difference between blame and planning. The call happened that evening at Helena's clinic office, speakerphone on, blinds drawn against the damp Oregon dusk. Judge Owens's voice was patient gravel. He listened without interrupting Leo's low-frequency responses. The old card with an unfamiliar signature. The years of silence. The father's fear. The housekeeper's notes. So, he said at last, you are not asking me to adjudicate history. You are asking for daylight on the path forward. Exactly, Helena said. An independent review of early records and a clean order for new evaluations and services, without turning this into a fight about who failed when Leo was an infant. Courts don't mend hearts, Judge Owens replied, but we can make room for the people who do. If you furnish specific documents, dates, signatures, protocols, use can set a status conference to formalize access to an independent center and require agencies to cooperate. This will not be about fault. It will be about future. Richard swallowed. Thank you, Your Honor. One more thing, Owens added, the voice of a man who has learned which rails keep a train on the track. Keep your promises small and your records clean. Hope is welcome, hype is not. When the line clicked off, the room held the last sentence like a candle. Hear that? Helena said softly. Small promises. Clean records. I can do that, Julia answered. I've been practicing. Richard rubbed his eyes, then looked up with something like humility, finally granted permission to show its face. Tell me what to sign, where to go, who to call. We'll handle the calls, Helena said. You handle your son. Back at the house, the lamps threw warm islands on the floor. Arthur took coats, placed them on wooden hangers like peace offerings, and did not ask questions he would later pretend not to have. Dinner at 6:30, he said, then added, softer. How did it go? Julia answered with the only truth that fit in one sentence. There is a door. We're learning the hinge. Arthur's eyes watered before he could edit them. He nodded and stepped aside. Later, after Leo fell asleep with a hand on the belly of the toy whale as if it were a drum, Julia returned to the study to finish filing. She opened the folio and smoothed the stack, aligning corners with a care that felt like prayer. A thin receipt folded into a patient square, slipped out from the back sleeve and drifted to the floor. She picked it up. Harbor Diagnostics, LLC, mobile newborn screening, date, day 6 of life, services, ABR click stimulus only, OA quick, screen payment, cash received, signature, H. Mason, PAC, beneath the signature, a handwritten note in neat, unfamiliar script, follow-up recommended, parent deferred. Julia stared at the line until the ink seemed to move. Parent deferred. She looked toward the hallway where the portraits kept their practiced stillness, where the house had learned to hold its breath for 11 long years. Outside, the river made its endless low argument for truth. She slid the receipt into a clear sleeve and closed the folio with both hands, as if shutting a door on a room that had been whispering behind it for a decade. In her notebook, under the day's clean bullet points, she wrote one sentence small enough to hide and sharp enough to cut. There was a second door at the beginning, and someone wrote that we chose not to open it. Richard Wakefield hadn't been inside his late wife's closet in years. The room smelled faintly of lavender sachets, long faded and fabric folded around grief. He opened a shoebox marked Eleanor Leo's first year, and his hands trembled. Inside were photographs, Leo wrapped in a hospital blanket, Eleanor's tired smile, a referral slip she had underlined in red ink, follow-up required. On the margin, in Eleanor's hand, a note, please read this carefully. Rich, promise me. Richard sank into the chair, the paper rattling like bones in his grip. I didn't keep my promise, he whispered. His chest heaved once, then again. He pressed his palms to his eyes until the memories swam in light. A knock. Julia's voice, quiet but certain. Mr. Wakefield. He didn't answer right away. When the door opened, he didn't move. She crossed the room slowly, sat in the chair opposite, and folded her hands. You found something, she said. He lifted the slip like a guilty verdict. She asked me to read it, to pay attention. But the week after that appointment, his voice caught. We buried her, and I signed what I was told. I thought God help me. I thought the less I questioned, the faster I could survive. Julia's eyes softened. You weren't surviving. You were drowning. He lowered the slip, his jaw tight. And in drowning, I let my son sink beside me. No, Julia said, steady as a handrail. You kept him alive. You built a fortress so strong even grief couldn't topple it. But walls can't feed a growing boy. That's why we're here now. Richard's throat worked. I failed her. You loved her, Julia countered. And now you love him enough to stand in the light. That's not failure. That's the beginning of honesty. He let the silence breathe, then nodded once, as if surrendering to truth was the only way forward. That afternoon, Rachel arrived with her tote bag and the portable keyboard. She set it up in the library, the lamplight turning the plastic keys into ivory. Today, she said gently, I want to try something simple. Low notes, steady rhythm, nothing to startle. Leo perched on the sofa, eyes flicking from her to the instrument. Julia sat nearby with her notebook, Richard standing at the doorframe like a man guarding both entry and exit. Rachel pressed a key, middle C, soft, safe, nothing. She moved down, lower, until the bass notes made the carpet hum. Leo's hand twitched. Rachel caught it. She played the same note again, slower. Do you hear the floor talking, Leo? The boy's lips pressed together. He lifted his hand, tapped the armrest once. Julia's breath caught. He's echoing you. Rachel's eyes glistened. She played again, dum dum dum. Leo responded, tap, tap, tap. His rhythm trailed but chased the sound like a child running after a kite, then like a secret escaping his mouth shaped something. Not clear, not long, but there. Ma, ma. The room froze. Julia whispered, it's his word. Richard staggered one step forward. Leo, his voice cracked. Say it again, son. The boy tapped once more, then shaped the sound. Broken, but undeniable. Richard pressed his hand to his mouth, shoulders shuddering. All these years, he said through tears, I thought silence was safety, but silence was stealing him. Julia touched his arm. Not stealing, waiting. Rachel wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. This is progress. Small, but real. Don't ask him for more yet. Let him own it. Richard nodded, voice low. I'll never rush him again. That evening a call came. Miguel Rivera from the county agency. His tone was professional, but Julia heard the current beneath it. We've reviewed Dr. Novak's report, Miguel said, and the audiology results. The state health authority agrees there's enough to warrant a preliminary investigation into Leo's case history. Effective immediately, an independent review is opened. Richard gripped the receiver tighter. Investigation of what? Not blame, Miguel clarified. Process. Early screenings, follow-up, documentation. We need to know whether standards of care were met. It's about ensuring his current plan isn't standing on broken ground. Richard closed his eyes, words escaping like confession. Broken ground, that's exactly what it feels like. Julia leaned closer to the phone. And if the ground proves broken, then we rebuild, Miguel said. And Leo receives services aligned with truth, not paperwork. You'll be contacted within the week for document collection and witness statements. Richard swallowed hard. I'll cooperate. Every page, every memory. After the line went dead, the house held its silence. This time it didn't feel like discipline, it felt like waiting for a new sound to arrive. Later, Julia found Richard in the study, staring at the old referral slip and the receipt from Harbor Diagnostics. His hands trembled, but not from denial anymore. I signed without reading, he said. I let strangers write my son's future because I couldn't bear to read the fine print. Eleanor begged me to see, and I closed my eyes. Julia placed a hand over his, then opened them. Now, that's what matters. Guilt looks backward. Love looks forward. He studied her face, searching for judgment. Finding none, he whispered, "Will he ever forgive me?" Julia's reply came slow, deliberate. Children forgive faster than parents forgive themselves. But forgiveness begins when a father says, "I'll do better, starting today." Richard exhaled like a man laying down a heavy stone. He nodded once, his shoulders lighter by a fraction. That night, Julia wrote in her notebook, April 2nd, 2011 library session with Rachel, low-frequency notes on keyboard. Leo responded with taps. First vocalization clear. Mama. Richard present. Emotional acknowledgement. Rachel confirmed progress. County agency preliminary investigation opened. She added, in smaller script, Richard's tears today were not weakness. They were the sound of a father finally hearing his own silence. She closed the book and set it on the nightstand. Down the hall, Leo slept with one hand resting on the toy piano, as if the music had finally invited him in. And for the first time in years, Richard stood in the doorway of his son's room, not guarding, not controlling, but simply present. July arrived on the river the way grace arrives quietly. Then, all at once, the county courthouse in Astoria wore the morning like a warm shawl. Through high windows, a mild sun laid soft squares on the floor, and the old building seemed to breathe easier for it. Let the light be kind, Julia thought. Palms pressed to the strap of her bag where her notebook weighted dates, times, low notes, small truths written in plain ink. Case 11 to 174. In recare plan for minor LW, the clerk called. Judge Owens looked over his glasses with the gravity of a man who knew when to lower his voice and make the room lean in. Let's start by remembering why we are here, he said. Not to exhume blame, but to set a child's future on level ground. Richard stood at counsel table without a lawyer tie, straight, hands not quite steady. On the other side sat Miguel Rivera from the agency, flanked by a staff attorney who kept her pen poised, listening. Dr. Helena Novak took the row behind. Julia, a calm anchor in a navy blazer. Dr. Patel from audiology occupied a seat near the aisle, folder on her lap, the kind of quiet you learn from listening for a living. Leo was not present by accommodation. Rachel waited with him in a park 2 blocks away, a keyboard app open on her phone just in case the afternoon wished to sing. Judge Owens nodded to the bailiff. A small TV cart hummed to life. We'll begin with the short hallway video submitted by Mr. Wakefield, the judge said. Marked Exhibit A. The clip played the corridor at 9:12 p.m. Low light. Julia, a shadow passing the library. One hand seating a frame with a motion so modest, a less patient world would have missed it. On the sofa inside the library, a boy at the low dull seat of wood to nail, his head turned not to the picture, to the change. The movement was small, repeatable, impossible to unsee once you'd seen it. Exhibit B, the clerk announced. Julia's notebook appeared on the document camera. Dates, tidy, bullet points, verbs that refuse drama. Chair glides left, to right, 1 second. Toy piano set down, head tilt 3 degrees, no flinch. Heel on wood seismograph, attention. A practice of attention, not a parade. Exhibit C, said the clerk. Dr. Patel rose, flipped open the folder, and set the audiogram. On the projector, Your Honor, she said, voice warm and measured. Objective and behavioral testing indicate absent mid to high frequency responses, but consistent, repeatable responses to low frequency stimuli at higher intensities and to input. In plain language, Leo has a door. It's low and it's narrow, but it's open. Is this consistent with the observations in the journal and the video? The judge asked. It is, Dr. Patel said. We plan a tone-burst ABR to confirm neural synchrony across frequencies, without sedation if possible, and to tailor a care plan that honors his access to low-frequency speech therapy informed by rhythm, music therapy informed by entrainment. Judge leaned back. Thank you. Exhibit D, the clerk announced. Helena stepped to the counsel table with the binder Julia had carried like a little ark. Dr. Novak, Miguel said, for the record, you filed the initial concern with the state. I did, Helena replied, sliding out a plastic sleeve card, a clean photograph of the brown neonatal bottle, the Harbor Diagnostics receipt. This is not a malpractice action. This is process. The question is whether Leo's early screening and follow-up met standard of care in his first weeks. We have a card for an infant, a BR-click stimulus only which interrogates high-frequency function near the cochlear base but can miss low-frequency hearing. We have an unfamiliar signature, H. Mason, PAC. We have a mobile lab receipt marked cash with a handwritten note, parent deferred. We have gaps. Gaps are not guilt, but they are not a plan. Parent deferred, the judge repeated, turning the phrase like a stone. He looked to Richard, Mr. Wakefield. Richard stood as if asked to stand in a church. He swallowed once. Your Honor, my wife died the week after that appointment. He didn't reach for the paper, he reached for honesty. I signed things I didn't read and obeyed instructions because obedience felt like survival. I thought silence was safety. I understand now it was only tidy. I let fear steer. I will not do that again. The words landed without theatrics. Julia watched the judge watch Richard, a small human exchange that had nothing to do with microphones, and everything to do with truth. Miguel cleared his throat. The agency's position, Your Honor, is simple. We move forward with an independent review of neonatal records, screening protocols used, and follow-up documentation. We formalize access to new evaluations and services aligned with current findings, and we do so under a protective order to safeguard the child's privacy. We are not pursuing fault, we are correcting the flaw. Good, Judge Owen said. He tapped his pen once, a habit that sounded like a gavel that had learned manners. Orders as follows. The courtroom stilled the way people still themselves. When a surgeon speaks. 1, the judge said, counting on the bench fingers that had signed more futures than verdicts. Independent evaluation authorized and ordered. Audiology with tone-burst ABR, speech-language assessment, versed in low-frequency strategies, and music therapy consult. Providers to be selected by the agency from approved centers, with input from Dr. Patel and Dr. Novak. Mr. Wakefield is to facilitate and attend. Richard nodded. Yes, Your Honor. 2. The judge continued. Records, Providence, Seaside, NICU, Harbor Diagnostics. Any mobile screening vendors who serviced the family in the first month produce original logs, reports, billing, signatures, and any notes appended, including handwritten remarks such as parent deferred, chain of custody to be documented. If H. Mason, PAC, is a licensed provider, we will have their attestation. He paused. The sunlight slid a little farther along the floor, as if even the day wanted to eavesdrop. 3, he said, softer. This is not a trial about yesterday. We are here to build tomorrow. No social media litigations, no press, small promises, clean records. He looked over his glasses again, finding Julia. Miss Julia. The court takes judicial notice of the value of a boring notebook. Keep it so. Yes, Your Honor, she said, a smile almost finding her. And 4, he finished. Status conference set for August 14th, 9 a.m., to review compliance, results, and next steps. The court retains jurisdiction to refine the plan in the child's best interest. The gavel made a sound as modest as the truth they had carried into the room. We're adjourned. In the hallway, the courthouse smelled like paper and old hope. People spoke in lowered voices as if they had all agreed not to bruise the morning. Richard leaned against the cool plaster, head back, eyes closed. I thought he'd ask me why I failed, he said. He asked you how you'll begin. Julia answered. Helena slid the fresh copies of the order into a manila envelope. We'll shepherd the records, she said. You shepherd Leo. Miguel joined them, tie loosened, pen finally capped. You'll hear from my office this week, he said to Richard. We'll coordinate the evaluations. We'll move on paper first, then practice. Richard's voice found the register that belonged to fathers who were done pretending they didn't need help. Tell me what to sign. Tell me where to be. Helena touched his arm. Be at the table. That's where love does its work. Across the atrium, a boy about Leo's age pressed his palms to the glass elevator. counting the floors by the low hum in his bones. Julia watched him and thought of the phrases that had carried them here. He has a door. Find the hinge. Small promises. She tucked her notebook back into her bag, like placing a candle where it could do the most good. Outside, the day had ripened. Rachel sat with Leo on a bench in the courthouse park under the filtered shade of an old maple. She held her phone flat. Between them, a bass line thumped soft from a tiny speaker. Dum-dum. Leo tapped the bench, a beat late, then closer, then on. Rachel looked up, caught Julia's eye, and lifted her hand in a quiet victory that no one else needed to see. How'd it go? Rachel asked when they reached her. The judge listened. Julia said, he made a path. Leo looked at his father. Richard crouched so they were eye level, not reaching, not leading, simply present. We're going to meet some new helpers, he said, voice steady. They're good at hearing what's quiet. Leo blinked, then laid his palm on the bench as if the wood might answer. Richard matched it, father and son, hands on the same note behind them. The courthouse doors breathed open and shut, a building practicing the art of letting people in and letting them go. On the order copy, black ink fixed the future to a date. Status August 14th, 9 a.m., and in the margin, Julia wrote one more line the judge would never see but might have recognized. When truth doesn't shout, we turn the lights up and listen. August came in on the river like a bass note felt before it was heard. On a Tuesday morning, the therapy center on Exchange Street opened a room for Leo. Not a clinic with hard angles, but a space with soft lamps, a small rug, and a low drum that looked like a coffee table with a heartbeat. This is the listening room, said the music therapist, Camilla Brooks, sleeves rolled, smile quiet. She touched the drum with an open palm, letting the sound travel through the floorboards instead of the air. We don't chase sound here, we invite it. Richard stood back far enough to let his son's orbit expand. Julia took a chair and matched Leo's breathing, the way someone keeps time until the orchestra knows what it wants to play. Camilla set a metronome on the rug. She didn't wind it. Leo, she said softly, can you feel the drum in your hands? She laid his palms flat on the surface. Together, they pressed down. Dum-dum, low, steady. Leo's eyes didn't widen, they steadied. His lips parted the way a door opens when you don't knock. You wait. We start with what the body already knows, Camilla said. Heartbeat, rocking footsteps. She glanced at Richard, then back to Leo. Presence is louder than instructions. Richard's fingers knotted, then loosened. I can do presence, he said, almost to himself. Camilla nodded. Then do that. She tapped the drum. Dum-dum. Leo's right index finger tried to follow. His timing lagged like a child chasing a kite, then shortened the gap. Dum-tap. Dum-tap until tap met dum, and the room exhaled. Good, Camilla murmured. When you want more, show me. She tapped twice. Leo stared, thought, and 2 quick taps. Again, 2 taps. A request, not a guess. Julia wrote in her notebook without looking down. 2 taps equals more. She added a small star and swallowed the yes, pressing at her mouth. They moved to humming. Camilla placed Leo's hand on her throat. This is the river, she said, and gave him an MDP and human. She guided his hand to his own throat. You make the river. At first he hummed, the way a light flickers in a storm. Then the current found him. A low vowel opened after it. More. Hanging in the room like a small lantern, Richard's breath made a sound. It wasn't a sob. It was a man stepping into a country he can finally name. More, he whispered, as if asking permission of the air. Leo tapped twice on the drum. Camilla smiled. He's asking for it, she said. Give him the river back. They did. 2 days later, the speech-language pathologist, Dana Cho, set a mirror on a table and rolled a cart to the same soft room. No whistles, no cartoon cards. She brought a straw and a paper cup half full of water. We'll use vibration to give speech a spine, Dana said, placing the straw between her own lips first and humming down into the water so the surface bubbled and the cup thrummed. Low and steady sound you can feel. Leo held the straw, watched the water, and hummed. The cup responded with a tiny storm. He startled at his own power, then laughed without sound, the kind of laugh that shakes the shoulders and forgives. The day we shape vowels first, Dana said, gentle as a seamstress. Open ah round O, smiley today, ah and O. She put his hand on her cheek to feel resonance, then moved it to his own. You'll know when it's right, your skin will tell you. Ah, a small candle. Oh, an ember. Dana nodded. Good. Anchor with M-O. She tapped the drum lightly. M-O, mo, mo. Leo said not the way a parrot repeats, but the way a boy claims. Richard closed his eyes. He didn't clap. He didn't praise. He looked up as if someone had opened a skylight. I have been shouting inside for 11 years, he said quietly to no one and to God. I can stop now. Dana glanced at him, approving. Less coaching, she said, more noticing. I can do noticing, he said, and meant it. Home became a rehearsal for the future. Julia wrote low and slow on a yellow sticky note and pressed it to the fridge. The wooden spoon replaced the metal on the counter. The washing machine's spin cycle low vibration, steady rhythm became a 5-minute listening walk down the hall where Leo learned to tap the wall twice at the corner for again. 6. We practice ma, oh Julia told Richard, drawing a little box in her notebook to check when the moments found them. At 7, Rachel comes with the keyboard app. Predictable as mercy, Richard said, smiling. At the Echo one evening, they sat cross-legged on the rug as the river put the house to bed. Rachel's phone sang a bassling dum-dum-dummed. Leo tapped the coffee table with the wooden spoon. A beat late, then on the beat, then, astonishingly, ahead, like someone stepping into a dance they've only ever watched through a window. Again, Julia said softly, pointing to the table. Leo tapped twice. Rachel replayed. He lifted the spoon and whispered, Mo. It had the weight of a sentence. Arthur paused in the doorway with a stack of linens and the unearned certainty of a man who had believed quiet was the most he could offer. The spoon rose and fell. Leo's mouth rounded. Mo, clear as a bell underwater. Arthur swayed as if the room had tilted. The linens slid to the chair. He pressed his knuckles to his lips, disciplined his face, failed, and let the tears come the way rain comes when a cloud decides it's time. I have guarded the silence, he said, voice roughened into truth. I thought I was protecting him. I was protecting my fear of being wrong. He looked at Julia, not for absolution, he wasn't that vain, but for instruction. Tell me what to do. Stand with us, Julia answered. Not in front, not behind. With Arthur nodded, eyes shining. He stepped inside the circle and, without ceremony, rested his palm on the table near Leo's. The drum inside the wood carried both heartbeats. September laid a quieter light on Astoria. The center sent progress notes that read like weather reports. Increased tolerance for vibro-tactile input, consistent two-tap request for repetition. Vowel production improving at low pitches. Spontaneous MO in home setting. Emergent ma during entrainment, no fireworks, just proof. Richard learned what presence felt like when it wasn't a performance. He sat on the floor even when the chair was closer. He put his phone in a drawer. He said fewer words and meant, all of them, Dad. Leo tried once. Jaw heavy on the consonant, the vowel doing the lamb's share of the work. Richard didn't correct. He didn't ask for a full word like a grade. He touched Leo's shoulder and answered. Here Julia witnessed it and didn't write it down. Some truths prefer the body to paper. They went to the beach after one session, September's wind blowing like an old choir. Leo stood where the tide reached and retreated. The low thunder under their feet made the boy look at Julia as if someone had said his name in a language they were only beginning to learn. He lifted both hands, palms open, then tapped Julia's wrist twice. Again, always, she said, and the sea obliged. On a Tuesday, Arthur brought the mail to the study with ceremony he usually reserved for silverware. Special delivery, he said, tapping a thick envelope with a finger that couldn't keep from trembling. The return address read, North Coast, Center for Communication and Music Therapy. Richard opened it with a care you give to things you already love. A single-page letter, heavy paper, clean type. He read silently once, then twice aloud, voice steadier by the sentence. Dear Mr. Wakefield and Miss Julia, we are pleased to invite Leo W. to our full recognition evening on October 12th, to honor students demonstrating notable growth. With your consent, Leo will share a brief rhythm composition developed during entrainment sessions. The evening is designed to celebrate persistence, partnership, and the quiet doors that open with care. He stopped. The line shook. Quiet doors that open with care. Julia felt the house listening. He'll have a room that claps, she said, eyes bright. Arthur cleared his throat like a man who'd swallowed a sunrise. We'll need a good shirt, he said, practical because he couldn't say holy, and a wooden spoon. Richard laughed an honest, shaken sound that made him look younger by 10 careful years. We'll bring 2, he said. He turned to Leo, who had wandered to the study doorway as if the letter had tugged his sleeve. Buddy, he said, kneeling, meeting those dark-lashed eyes. They want you to play. Would you like that? Leo looked at the letter, then at the coffee table, then at the space on the rug where his drum would go. He tapped the doorframe twice again, then found the sound in his mouth he knew how to carry. Julia placed her hand against her notebook to stop it from shaking. She didn't write anything. Some moments don't need ink. They need witnesses. Outside, September leaned toward October. Inside, a family gathered around a simple invitation, as if it were a small fire on a cold road. The room didn't get louder, it got brighter. And in the quiet that followed, the future set its tempo. Dum dum dum. The evening came on like a kindness. October 12th, the North Coast Center strung warm bulbs across its small courtyard, and the windows held a low honeyed glow that made strangers look like neighbors. On the program handbill, a line sat just beneath the title, Recognition Evening. Quiet doors that open with care. In the green room, someone had set out paper cups and a bowl of peppermint candies. Camila checked the little stage, adjusted the low drum and a narrow wooden riser the size of a suitcase, then came back and crouched so she was level with Leo. Your rhythm knows the room, she told him, voice soft. You don't have to shout it. Let the wood carry you. Leo's thumb traced the rim of his wooden spoon. He wore a soft blue shirt. Arthur had steamed it twice. Dark trousers, clean sneakers. His hair was combed and still managed to look like a boy's hair minutes after combing should end. His eyes were steady in that way that meant he'd found a lane. Richard stood close enough to be present and far enough to let the moment belong to its rightful owner. He smoothed his tie and then quit fussing with it, a man learning to let good things be. If you need me, he said to Leo, I'm every square of this room. Julia knelt on the other side, notebook still in her bag for once. I'll be where the light from the aisle touches the floor. Find that if you want to. She tapped her wrist twice again, their smallest promise. Rachel peered around the curtain with her phone in her palm. The bass app open and muted for now they're ready, she mouthed. Dana, the speech therapist, set a paper cup and a straw on a side table and didn't ask for a miracle. She just let the boy see the tools he already knew. Dr. Patel and Helena slipped into the back row together like lake water finding its level, content to be part of the quiet that holds a room up. Arthur hovered by the door, hands clasped as if he were about to say grace. When Leo looked over, Arthur managed a small, embarrassed but, we brought 2 spoons, he said, in case one gets stage fright. Leo's mouth twitched toward a smile. He took both. On stage, a volunteer introduced the evening with modest pride. Names were read, small pieces were played. The crowd clapped the way a heart claps earnestly and without fuss. Then the MC said, please welcome Leo W., sharing an original rhythm composition developed during entrainment sessions. The murmur in the room stepped back to give the moment space. Leo walked to the drum. He placed 1 spoon on the riser, kept the other in his right hand. He set his left palm on the drumhead. He looked toward the aisle, there Julia, where the light from the exit sign fell to the floor like a bookmark. He set his feet. He listened. To the center of the room. Dum. The first strike was low and patient. Dum. The second matched it. Not louder, just sure. A pause long enough to be a choice. Then dum dum dum, a little cascade like river over stones. He held the stick just tight enough to say what he meant and loose enough to let the drum answer. The room learned the pattern the way a body learns a lullaby. Dum dum, pause, dum, pause, dum. He added 2 quiet taps on the riser again, folding the private language into public music. Rachel, from the wings, matched him under her breath and then didn't, choosing to let the boy lead. Richard's hand found the back of his own chair and stayed there, as if steadiness could travel through wood. He didn't look around to see if anyone noticed his eyes. Everyone noticed and looked away in the kindest way. Camilla watched his shoulders, not his hands. He's not chasing it, she whispered to no one. He's choosing it. On the 3rd phrase, Leo lifted his palm from the drum, let the stick carry the note alone, then put his left hand back so the sound did what it had done in the listening room, traveled through the wood into the bones of the people who needed to know they were welcome here. He finished without flourish. 1 last dum, not a period, so much as a door left friendly and ajar. The room held the silence after like a second music. Then the applause rose warm, not wild, grateful more than impressed. The kind of clapping that says, we saw you choose. Camila touched his shoulder. If you want to speak, she said, say only the truth you can carry. They had set a microphone on a stand on the riser short. Simple. Leo stepped to it. His hands were steady in the way they are when you've held a spoon and a heartbeat for months. He searched the first row and then the second. He found the aisle light, the bookmark, and the person beside it. Julia lifted her chin, not in instruction but in belonging. Leo touched the mic gently the way you touch a sleeping bird. His mouth shaped a hum, first the way he'd been taught to find his own river. He held it until the note found his chest. Then he opened to a vowel, soft. The room breathed with him. He rounded it into O, then anchored it back to M-mo. His eyes did not leave Julia's. The consonants arrived like shy guests who had decided to stay. First son, I hear. He paused, not for effect but for breath, came from my mother's heart. He turned a palm toward Julia. There was a sound a crowd sometimes makes that isn't clapping, isn't crying, isn't a gasp. It's the air leaving 100 bodies at once to make room for one boy's sentence. Julia rose and didn't move forward, because this was his stage, but her face held a light you cannot purchase. Richard's voice arrived in the smallest register a father owns. I hear you, son. His hand left the chair and found his own chest, acknowledging the drum he'd ignored for years. Arthur's mouth folded around a word he didn't say. Tears navigated the quiet lines of his face with practiced dignity. He has a country, he murmured, and we learned the language late. Helena's hand found Dr. Patel's sleeve. A quiet thank you passed between people who worship at the altar of measured truth. Dana pressed the paper cup to her chest the way some people hold a hymnal. The MC said nothing wise, which was wise. The applause returned, not as loud, but longer, like a standing prayer. Leo bowed the way he'd been taught, not too low, not too quickened, left the stage with both spoons, pockets against his thighs to keep them from falling. Backstage, the green room multiplied into arms and careful words. Camila bent to his level. You let the wood speak, she said. It said your name back. Leo tapped the rim of the drum twice again. Camila laughed. Tomorrow, she promised. Tonight we eat cake. Richard knelt so they were eye level. He did not reach for Leo first. He waited. The boy leaned forward and put his forehead to his father's. The gesture was not theatrical. It was inventory. I am here. You are here. Thank you for the room, Richard whispered. For the light. For the time it took to open a door without breaking it. Leo lifted a spoon and touched it to his father's shirt over the heart, then to Julia's. Dumb. A benediction in 2 notes. The river wore its October face when they reached the Astoria shore, silver, forgiving, tireless. The 3 of them walked the boardwalk where the wood keeps its own diary of footsteps. The bulbs from the center were far behind them now, but town hummed low. The bridge drew its long line toward the dark. Julia slipped her hand into Leo's. Richard took the other. No one directed, no one counted. They matched the sea without needing to talk about tempo. Cold? Richard asked. Leo shook his head. He looked out at the water as if reading it. He turned to Julia and touched her wrist twice again. She nodded, and the ocean complied, sending a slower wave, wider, as if it too were learning a boy's language. You know, Richard said, voice light as the mist, once I thought my job was to keep this family quiet. Turns out it's to keep us listening, Julia smiled. Quiet is a room. Listening is a home. He considered, then laughed softly. You always bring the lines I wish I'd written. Then write them, she said. On the days in front of us. He squeezed Leo's hand. Deal. They stood while the tide practiced its faithful lesson. The house on the bluff would be the same house tomorrow would. Windows. A clock that now chimed again. But something fundamental had shifted. They would carry sound through it like fire through winter low. Steady. Enough. Leo let go one hand long enough to press the spoon from his pocket into Julia's palm. He patted her chest once, right above the place a drum hides. Then he said it again, easier now, the consonants finding their courage. Mother. Julia's eyes closed, not to hide tears, but to hold the word where it belonged. When she opened them, the boy was watching her the way people watch light land on water. She kissed his hair and then didn't speak, because some replies should be carried, not said. They turned back toward the town, walking the long wooden stretch, the way families in good stories do, 3 shadows lengthening into one. The river kept time, the bridge kept faith, and the night kept their secret, which was not a secret anymore. There is no silent house where a family learns to listen, only rooms, lit from within, where love makes a sound low and bright enough to live by.